Kenneth Malphus, a student at Southeastern Early College, interviewing Janet Hedrick, the principal of Acme Delco Elementary School, on what it means to be an American. So, Ms. Janet, what do you think about your American experience overall?
Well, I have really enjoyed my American experience. I think that America is a land of freedom, first of all, and that's one thing that we really value in America, is we have freedoms that I don't think any other country in this world has, like an American does. I've been given a lot of opportunities in America. One thing that I really appreciate as an American is the privilege to go to school and be educated from first grade. We didn't have kindergarten when I was in elementary school, but to be educated from first grade and through 12th grade, free public education for me, and then the opportunities to go to college and to really go as far as I wanted to go, and the freedom to worship and have a family and make decisions, and those freedoms are very important. And so my American experience is just a great experience.
And what time period were you born in?
I was born in 1959, and so I guess that 59 I didn't remember much, but so I was born, my early years were in the 60s, and grew up, graduated in the 70s, and a lot of different kinds of things happened during those years.
All right. And what was life like during that time that you grew up in?
Well, Malachi, in the 60s, I started school. And when we started school in the 60s, which probably I started school around, I was born in 59, I probably started somewhere around 65. And we went to an all-white school. Now, it was not unusual for me to integrate with other races, because our family was always friends with other races. So I'd always been around minorities and enjoyed them, and we had friends of all races, really. And also, being raised in a pastor's home, we really we mingled with races outside of this country too, when we had missionaries to come over. So I had a lot of experience with other races, but for some, that was not the case. So when I started school, it was an all-white school, and when I got in the 5th grade, the laws were changed and segregation was ended, schools integrated, and that was a big deal, because now the children of all races in the community were going to the same school. Children, teachers of different races were teaching children, and not only were we integrated as far as the school, but our physical location changed, because when we integrated, the school I went to became the junior senior high school, and the school that had been in the past the black school became the elementary school. So we actually moved physical locations to another school. So that was a big thing for the community at that time, but we got along great. It was not a hard transition whatsoever for me, because I had grown up with other races. We had worked together on our farm. We had eaten together. We had had a lot of time together with other races. So it wasn't hard for me, but it certainly was a big change for a lot of people.
And that goes back to the equal opportunity, like you were talking about. Living in America, everybody's got an equal opportunity to do what they want and to have an education.
Right.
And
that's
so
exactly right.
And you said you were born in 1959, the late 50s, and you had life like you did then. But what would it have been like for your parents when they were growing up?
Well, of course, what I know about my parents growing up, we read in the books, but mostly what we remember is what they tell us. We can read it in the books, but they tell us the stories. And of course, they tell the stories that are most memorable to them, and those are the things that are etched in your mind that you remember. But my parents were both born in the 30s, and of course, the Great Depression was just coming to an end in those 30s. And so when they grew up, it was a very poor time, especially in rural Columbus County, because I live in Columbus County now, but actually my parents also were born and raised in Columbus County. And at that time, agriculture was a big thing. Now, I know that agriculture is fading somewhat in our county now, but then a lot of people farmed. And they didn't have a lot of farmland because it was tough to get farmland. And if you had any land at all, I mean, you had to clear it by hand. And I've heard the stories of how they would clear the land by hand, pick up the stumps, and how that it was tough times. And if you got a little bit of land cleared to farm, you were just really happy about that. But with everybody being in agriculture, there was not a lot of money in it, but they made a living. And of course, what really was neat about being in agriculture is they were able to eat off of the land. The things that they raised, the cattle they raised, the pigs that they raised, the vegetables they raised. So even in tough times, if you were on a farm, at least you knew that you could probably get something to eat. And but times were really tough for them then. Of course, when my parents married in the 50s, things were starting to get a little better because when we had World War II, after World War II, things started to pick up, industry started to pick up. And then in the late 50s, when I was born, things were starting to get a little better for them. And in the 60s, industry really did pick up. And so there was really some good economic times in those years. So it seems like in economy, things come and they go, you know. You have rough times and it'll pick up and get better, and
slow down.
It's slow down again, which is what we're going through now, is a slow time. Of course, it's still much better than probably my parents ever had it, even though we think it's tough.
When you were going to school in the 60s and 70s and growing up then, what are some of the most notable events you remember from that time period?
Well, when I was younger, and I just barely remember very much about it, but I can remember John F. Kennedy being elected president. And, you know, things have really changed a lot because it was a big thing that he was elected president, and he was Catholic, because a Catholic had never been elected president, and that was the big thing in the news. And the Kennedys were really very notable people. And I can remember when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, even though I was very young. And that was a very sad time. People were very brokenhearted because he was very loved by the common, everyday people. And then one person that I remember, because in the first election I was old enough to vote in, Jimmy Carter was voted in president, and he only lasted one term. Of course, I remember Ronald Reagan's term, and Ronald Reagan, there was a lot of notable things happened in Ronald Reagan's term. He had an economic plan that a lot of people really liked, and also the Soviet Union came down during Ronald Reagan's time, and so there were some notable events in his time that really changed the course of America.
And what people do you remember from these events that happened? Because there are a lot of notable people that lived along during those times.
Yeah. Well, those were the politicians, the presidents, I guess, who had so much impact. And, of course, then, because that I have a lot of faith, I always had a lot of respect for Mother Teresa because of all the benevolent work that she did in such poor countries, and I always was very impressed by her, and thought that she was a great woman. And so she was memorable for me. And then, of course, for the music, there were the Beatles and Elvis Presley. And Elvis Presley probably changed a lot of things in music, because before Elvis Presley came along, music and on television was very conservative, and there was not a lot of moving and shaking going on. And I don't know if I really remember this or if I've just read it and think I remember it, but Elvis Presley was a very popular character in my time. And he came on television, and of course he was really moving and shaking his legs, and when I think it was the Ed Sullivan show he was on, they cut off his performance from here up because of his leg shaking. They thought, whoa, that has just got to be immoral for him to be doing that. And if you think about the way that there was a big deal made about Elvis Presley shaking his legs and moving around, and they cut him off from here down. And you look at the music you see on television now, you say, what, really? But that really happened. And women would go to his concerts, and he would just throw his his handkerchiefs and his scarves at him, and they would just go wild. So Elvis Presley was a big musician in my time.
And like the civil rights, you know, Martin Luther King and such as that. You talked about integration of the schools. Is there still a lot of that going on as you were going through school and growing up then?
You mean the racial tensions,
Yeah,
or
like the marches and stuff, the protests. Was a lot of that going on?
there were, and you know, I can just faintly remember even events in our in Wilmington with the Wilmington 10, and of course you remember in history the sit-ins and Martin Luther King giving his speech, and everybody. I just believe everybody who's ever lived since Martin Luther King's time remembers the speech, the most notable speech of "I Have a Dream" to try to mend racial relations. And even I think there has been a lot of mending of racial relations. I really do.
Yeah.
And I believe that opportunities have really equaled out so much for so many. But on an individual basis, I still see tensions from time to time. But I don't see it as the entire group of people. I see it more in segments and pockets of people than I do entire groups of people.
And how do you think these people have changed, like the course of American history through their actions?
Well, of course, you know, as we think about Ronald Reagan, I mean, when you think about the Soviet Union coming down, I mean, in my time, I can remember everybody was afraid of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? What are they going to do? And you think about them coming down. I mean, wow, that was a big thing. And I think the Berlin Wall came down during the Berlin Wall came down during Ronald Reagan's time. So when you're talking about walls coming down, and that really I think those were the precursors for the global awareness that we talk about so much now. You know, it's almost become a buzzword now that we talk about global awareness, global economy, and really we are in a global economy. When you see which really that was a big thing too, was the Fair Trade Agreement. Now that started a lot. That Fair Trade Agreement that we signed started this international trade, and now you know the trade is just it's free. It's free trade. I mean that's what it is. And I'll tell you something that else that has been just very notable. It's changed the course of everybody's life, and that is the internet.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the internet has changed everybody. Now, with a touch of a button, you're all over the world. You purchase all over the world. You talk to people all over the world. You communicate. I mean, there's no barriers now to buying, talking, learning. I mean, there's more information now than there ever has been, and that's probably changed life more than anything I know. Is the access to the internet, the World Wide Web, www.
Times have changed a lot since the 60s and the 70s. How is it? What are some of the biggest differences that you notice now from when you were young? Well,
that's probably the biggest difference. I know that the World Wide Web is probably the biggest difference. How you can sit in your living room and take care of your business. You can pay your bills online. I can remember, I mean, the mail has always been around. My parents always sat down at pay time and they wrote their checks. They put them in the envelope, put the stamp on them, and a lot of people still do that. But I can remember a lot of people who actually, when they got paid, actually took their bills around from store to store to pay their bills. And they took it, you know, and paid it. But now, people pay their bills online. They do their purchasing online. Everybody knows what's going on with everybody with the Facebook. I mean, you keep up with everybody that's going on. There's a lot of great things. Of course, there's a lot of things that aren't so great with all that too. But that's changed probably the course more than anything else that I know.